right, it is Thursday, and you know what that means. It is time for our weekly segment, Immortals of the Squared Circle, where every week I take a look at the Mount Rushmore of a different topic in the world of professional wrestling. This week, I'm going to be discussing the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling. I'll be breaking down the 4 women's wrestlers who have made the biggest impact and left the biggest legacy in professional wrestling. So let's jump right in with my Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling. Starting with, I don't think you can start a Mount Rushmore without throwing Trish Stratus onto that mountain. Carve her in. To me, she's synonymous with women's profession. There was a part of me that said Sable. There was a part of me that, and then that's not happening. It's Trish Stratus, right? Considered one of the pioneers of women's wrestling, a trailblazer for so many female wrestlers that came after her. She had all the in-ring ability, all of the charisma, longevity. Like she had everything you need, and still like comes back from time to time and can still do it. And I think she had a strong impact. And I think that, I'm not a female, so I don't know, but when I hear a lot of the women's wrestlers speak, I hear them speak as like Trish Stratus was the one that they looked up to and really, kind of made them want to get into professional wrestling. And so if you choose Trish Stratus, I think on the flip side, you have to choose her counterpart, right? Because if women didn't look up to Trish Stratus, a lot of the women's wrestlers looked up to Lita. So I think Lita would be the second name that I would put on the Mount Rushmore for women's wrestlers. And I think, she was one of the most popular wrestlers, one of the most influential wrestlers in the 2000s. She was basically the pioneer, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, of like high flying when it comes to women's wrestling. She did things that like the Hardys were doing that no other women's wrestler was doing at the time. Like she was extremely innovative for her time, and her athleticism and her impact in the women's division and WWE. I think that Trish Stratus and Lita, they're solid choices to go, 1A and 1B up on the Mount Rushmore. Then it gets a little tricky because I think you can go in different directions, but I think that you can't talk about people's legacies and you can't talk about impact on pro wrestling without throwing China up onto that Mount Rushmore, right? Once again, a pioneer, once again, so impactful in pro wrestling. One of the first females, if not the first female, to kind of break down the barrier and compete in the same matches in the same way as men, right? To win intercontinental championships and for people to not absolutely just roll their eyes when it happened, right? It was believable. China broke down barriers in professional wrestling. Known for her incredible strength, her ability to just to compete. She just competed, part of D-Generation X. It's unfortunate the way that, the kind of last chapter of her life. But I think when you're talking about professional wrestling and you're talking about the Attitude Era, China was impactful and possibly the greatest period of pro wrestling. The most talked about period of pro wrestling. China was right there, and China was a huge part of that time. So then we got to carve out the last spot, right? We got to carve out the last spot. And I think that I want to go more modern. I want to jump to current times for this one. And there was some debate in my head between two different people, but ultimately I settled on putting Charlotte Flair on my Mount Rushmore. And I toyed with the idea of Becky Lynch. And I know I'm going to take a ton of shit for that. But there were moments when I was sitting down to make this Mount Rushmore that Becky Lynch would creep in and make me go, Charlotte Flair, nepotism, people don't necessarily love her all the time. But I think that just based on accomplishments alone and like being the most successful female wrestler of all time, you can't not put Charlotte Flair on the Mount Rushmore. So when you look up and you go Trish Stratus, you go Lita, you go China, you have to put Charlotte Flair there, right? She's got the athleticism. She's got the strength. She's got the in-ring ability. She's got the pedigree, second generation wrestler. You know, maybe, possibly by the end of her career will overshadow what her father did. I don't know. That may be a reach, but I definitely think that, you know, at the end of her career, we'll look back and we'll probably call her the GOAT. If she's not already the GOAT, I think we'll look back and probably call her the GOAT of professional wrestling. I think so. But that's my picks for the top 4 female wrestlers of all time. Now I want to hear from you guys. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling? Post your Mount Rushmore in the comments of this video below, and let's start debating. Let me jump in there and tell you why you're wrong, even though you're probably more right than I am. Who do you think deserves a spot on the Mount Rushmore of women's wrestling? Let me know. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow to tomorrow's show, where I will discuss some of the best answers that I read in the comments with Lauren, because it is Level Up Friday, and you know what that means. It's time to level up your knowledge of the world of pro wrestling with our special guest, my better half, Level Up Lauren. We're going to break down all of the action from this past week. We'll talk about the biggest matches and the most talked about moments. We'll also give our predictions on what's to come and our hot takes from the news and gossip of the past week. So don't miss out this week's Level Up episode of the Casual Wrestling Daily Podcast. Tune in and let's level up together. And with that, I think we can officially ring the final bell.
Step in the ring, if you ready, let's go. Hey, Casual Wrestling Community Show. You already know, talking WWE, keep it rolling.